Hey, greetings everybody. Gleekon here, coming back at you with another episode of Lore of Warcraft as we plow forward into what seems to be the buildup of the finale of this book, the second book in the trilogy of the Demon Soul. Here we go with chapter 19. So stay a while. Ignition. It's almost like trying, trying to think what it sounds like. I don't know, like a bad Captain Picard or something. I don't know. Okay, here we go. Although he had told Malfurion that Coriel Strauss would arrive before long, Krasus insisted that he and the elf begin heading in the general direction of the battle. He did not do it because he felt that it would cut down the trek. Hardly that. The distance they covered could be flown by an aged, ill dragon in barely a few minutes. Healed by the druid's miraculous spell, Coriel Strauss would take only one. No. They walked because the dragon mage needed to walk in order to keep his impatience in check. He wanted so much to do something to hasten their journey, but he dared not create another portal to reach their destination, not after the last disaster. I wouldn't call it a disaster. That left it to waiting for his younger self, but even with the fleet dragon coming to pluck them up, Krasus felt as if he had no more time remaining. Events were coming to a head, and he was out of options. Yeah, speaking of, this giant purple worm or whatever attacks them. What is the deal with that? I can't even think of... I mean, there's some worms. They're not common. If Coriel Strauss could get them to the struggle swiftly, then things could still be salvaged. If not... Master Krasus, I think I spy something behind us. Prying that it was not another of Neltharion's hunters, he peered back. A single huge shape moved determinedly toward them. There could be no mistaking that it had seen them. Krasus suddenly felt a tingling in his head. He allowed himself a smile. It is Coriel Strauss. Praise be. The red leviathan's wings beat hard, each stroke seeming to eat away another mile. Coriel Strauss grew rapidly, his expression finally visible. Krasus thought his younger self looked extremely relieved. There you are, thundered the behemoth, landing a short distance behind them. Each second of flight felt like an hour, even though I flew my fastest. You are a welcome sight, the mage told him. Coriel Strauss lowered his head and eyed Krasus most curiously, as if puzzled by something concerning him. Is it truly so? The way he asked made Krasus start. Coriel Strauss knew exactly who and what the spellcaster actually was. Yes, he replied to his other self, it is. And you, the dragon said, turning to Malfurion, I am forever in your debt, night elf. There is no need for that, the behemoth snorted. So you say. You were not the one dying. Krasus' eyes narrowed. You were attacked, were you not? Aye, two of the Earth Warder's own. They were filled with a horrid madness. I slew one, but the other caught me. He too is dead now, though. It is as I feared. The mage could say no more, the spell preventing him. Frustrated, he turned to a subject he could discuss. We must return to Ronan and the others. Are you prepared to take us there? Climb aboard, and we will be on our way. The two did as the dragon bade. Once they had settled at his shoulders, Coriel Strauss stretched his wings, then gently took off. He circled the field twice before heading toward the direction of the battle. As they flew, Krasus constantly glanced behind them. He was certain that they were fast approaching the point when the dragons would be coming, but so far he noted nothing. That gave him hope that he could devise a plan to deal with Neltharion's betrayal before it took place. If the evil of his creation could be stopped, or better yet, wielded by one not tainted, then the demons could be defeated and his own kind saved from their slide to near extinction. We must be getting near, Malfurion called. The sky is growing hazy. Sure enough, the foul mist that pervaded wherever the demons had marched soon met them. Coriel Strauss tried to keep low, but in order to avoid flying blind, he had to practically let his torso scrape the ground. When that effort finally proved unmanageable, he said, I must fly higher. Perhaps there we will find the limit to this murk. Through the mist, the trio rose. Krasus squinted, but saw nothing beyond his younger self's nose, and sometimes not even that far. With visibility so poor, he knew that Coriel Strauss had to rely on smell and other senses to make headway. There must be an end to it, the red dragon snapped. I will find it, even if it takes me A winged figure suddenly appeared in their path. The Doom Guard darted back into the mist the moment he saw the dragon. Coilstraws immediately gave chase, forcing Krasis and Malfurion to hold on tight. "Leave him," the mage shouted. "We must get to the battle." But the fierce wind created by Coilstraws' swift flight carried away his words. Krasis beat on the dragon's neck, but the heavy scales prevented the other from noticing. It's a little gnat or something. "What about the spell?" Malfurion cried. "Just something to attract his attention." Krasis had wanted to do that, but knew better. "If we startle him at all, he may jolt and drop one or both of us. In this thick mist, it would be impossible for him to catch us before we hit the ground below." Just use levitate, or whatever it is that, slow fall, feather fall, whatever it is that the wizards have. Forced to let Coilstraws continue his pursuit, the two could only lean low and hope that the dragon either caught the demon quickly or gave up. However, recalling exactly how determined he had been when younger, Krasis knew that Coilstraws would not turn back so soon. His own stubbornness now worked against all of them. Again the demon flickered into sight. The fearsome horned warrior flew as fast as his fiery wings could carry him. Even he understood that he could not stand against such a giant. The mage frowned. The Doomguard had their share of cunning and could see through this mist far better than their foes. The demon should have been able to figure out a way to lose Coilstraws, who was clearly having trouble locating him. Not for the almost straight line the demon flew. The truth suddenly dawned on Krasis. "Malfurion, prepare yourself. We are about to be attacked." The druid looked around, seeking a foe in the fog. A second later, he and Krasis were greeted by many. The winged warriors came at the trio from all angles. At least half a dozen rose up under Coilstraws, striking at the dragon's chest and stomach. Others dropped down, seeking to either slay or knock off the two riders. Several more fluttered about in front of and behind the Leviathan. Coilstraws roared, sending out a flood of fire at those in front of him. Most of the demons scattered, but one he caught dead center, reducing the horned warrior to ash. The red's massive tail swung like a mace, battering 3 of the Doomguard away. The others darted in, slashing with their horrific blades and even managing a few cuts in the scales. Atop him, Krasis and Malfurion were harried. The dragon mage managed to cast a quick spell that created a glowing orange shield above them. Fire shield, or flame shield, whatever. But the demons battered relentlessly at it, quickly weakening his work. The night elf reached into a pouch at his side. He took from it some small particles and cast them at those demons most immediate. As they touched each of their targets, the particles blossomed into huge tendrils, creeper vines. Malfurion muttered under his breath, and the vines expanded in every direction. The demons began tearing and slashing at the plants, overwhelming them, but the vines grew at a swifter pace than they could cut. Several encircled and tightened around one demon's throat. There was a crackling sound, and the horned warrior slumped and plummeted from sight. And other demons found their limbs, and most important, their wings. Entangled, the two fell screaming to their deaths. Krasis cried out as a Doomguard who had gotten under the shield cut him on the shoulder. Eyes blazing, the mage took out much of his frustration with a single word of power. The demon howled as his flesh melted like wax, dripping over and through his fiery armor. That which passed for bones clattered in a heap before spilling groundward. I don't know what spell that is, but it'd be cool to have access to it. Yet still there seemed Doomguard everywhere. Krasis could not help but feel that they had been set there to await either the return of the one dragon that had aided the Night Elves or any other of the great beasts. The irony that the demons might have delayed Neltharion's betrayal long enough for Krasis to do something about it did not escape the mage. Hindered by the fact that he carried riders, Coilstraws could not dive about as he normally would have, but the dragon nonetheless made good use of his other skills. One demon came too close. With a snap of his jaws, Coilstraws crushed the attacker, then spat out the remains. Shaking his head, he uttered, "Horrible taste! Horrible!" Krasis continued to look around. The Burning Legion never came in one assault. They always had another attack awaiting for the proper moment. He spotted 4 Doomguard lying side by side. After a moment, he realized that they all held on to what at first seemed a long, thick rope. As they neared, however, he saw that it was not a rope, but rather some sort of flexible metal line. He jerked his gaze in the opposite direction. Sure enough, 4 more demons carried a similar object, and both groups appeared headed for Coilstraws' wing area. "Malfurion, look there!" The druid did, his expression turning perplexed. "What do they plan to do with that?" "Tangle or bind his wings, likely. Coilstraws is too distracted. We must do what we can to stop them." Even as he spoke, the Elder Mage sighted 2 more groups likewise armed. The demons wanted to ensure they accomplished their dire task. As those carrying the lines neared, the other Doomguard fought with more frenzy. Krasis and the Night Elf tried focusing on the true threat, but the Burning Legion would not permit them. A huge gust of wind abruptly scattered many of the hellish warriors above. Malfurion exhaled, the spell with all else taking something out of him. However, he had bought Krasis time to act. Borrowing from one of the druid's most potent attacks, the one that had slain Hekar, Krasis eyed the first group. The demons nearly had the impossibly long wire over a distracted Coriel left wing. If they succeeded in looping it around, the dragon would be forced to try to stay aloft with the right, an insurmountable task. The bolt struck only one of the demons, but the very line they carried sent the shock through to the others. The monstrous attackers shook and screamed, then as the lightning faded, their limp hands released the metal bond. The four plummeted into the mist. Although he had stopped one set, Krasis now saw that there were at least 5 others. The other winged fighters closed in, bedeviling the 3.
I must ask of you the greatest of favors, thundered the red dragon. Cling to me as if your lives depended upon it, for they certainly will.
The 2 smaller figures immediately obeyed. Krasis shouted,
Hook your feet under the scale, Malfurion, quickly.
Just as they both did what he suggested, Coriel spun on his back. The tactic took the Burning Legion by complete surprise. Coriel huge leathery wings struck demon after demon. 2 of the groups carrying the metal lines went floundering, their burdens vanishing into the mist below. As he spun, the red behemoth also unleashed 3 quick but stunning bursts of flame. The first 2 utterly ravaged a pair of Doomguard, the last missed but scattered several more attackers.
Look out,
Malfurion cried. A huge missile barreled into the dragon's chest. Krasis' footing slipped, and he suddenly dangled by his hands. The druid could do nothing to help him, barely holding on himself. The fiery figure bounded away from its victim. The infernal dropped into the mist, unconcerned about the tremendous distance it would fall. Even from up here, the demon would survive a crash below unscathed. The other attackers used the moment to close. Krasis kicked at the blade of one as he pulled himself back onto the red dragon's back. Malfurion threw some more particles from his pouch, but the now wiser Legion forces all but avoided them. Only one Doomguard fell prey to the vines, but with so many others around, the loss was negligible. As Krasis seated himself again, one of the groups began winding the long line around Coriel right wing. Jabbing his fingers at the 4, he spoke another word of power. His fingernails snapped off, flying at the demons. As the nails flew, they stretched to more than a foot long each. In rapid succession, all 4 demons froze where they were as the sharp missiles bored through them. Krasis rubbed his fingers where new nails were already growing, and watched as the demons stopped.
Coriel, Krasis shouted, we must break free. We cannot stay here and fight like this.
This time his younger self heard him, and although clearly he did not like to leave the battle unfinished, he deferred to Krasis.
That may be more difficult than you think.
Krasis understood exactly how difficult it would be. There were Doomguard everywhere, and the dragon, mindful of his riders, had to move with care. That was what the Burning Legion now counted on. But they had to leave. They had already delayed too long. The Leviathan paused to incinerate a careless Doomguard.
I have one notion. It worked before. Hold tight again.
Neither Krasis nor the Night Elf had ceased holding tight since nearly being tossed earlier. Still, they both gripped the dragon by the scales as best they could. And no sooner had they done it than Coriel wings ceased beating. The dragon sank like a rock, leaving the startled demons hovering high above. By the time they started after, Coriel was far, far out of reach. Malfurion shouted. Krasis gritted his teeth and recalled too late that this had been a favorite strategy of his when younger. Most opponents, even other dragons, expected his kind to stay aloft. Vaguely, Krasis remembered experiencing something like this when Coriel had fought the 2 blacks. Down and down they fell, the dragon using his wings only to keep from flipping over. It seemed impossible that his passengers would hold on, but somehow they did. It occurred to Krasis that, while with the mist so thick his younger self might not see the ground soon enough, but then a strange thing happened. The mist simply vanished. It was as if some great being had cut a wedge out of the haze. A faint touch still remained, but visibility was so good that Krasis could see hills far, far away.
Ha!
Roared a triumphant Coriel. He beat his wings, jostling his companion slightly. The dragon caught the wind and eased smoothly into flight again. Of the Burning Legion there was no sign. Coriel did not wait for them to catch up. He flew on toward their original destination, moving at a speed that none of the demons could possibly match. Behind Krasis, Malfurion gasped.
May I never have to do that again. Night elves were surely not meant to fly as much as I have.
After this journey, I would hardly blame you for such feelings. Graces suddenly eyed the path ahead. Once again, I'm having a sense of deja vu. Most disturbing. I think it's interesting that even in Old Kalimdor, they speak French.
What is it? What's wrong now? More demons?
That would be a simple situation, Druid. This appears far more complex.
What do you mean?
Look at the swath of clarity and what has been one continuous blanket of evil since the Burning Legion's arrival.
Maybe my people are defeating them, and this is the first sign.
Krasis wished that he could share Malfurion's optimism. He raised his head to the air and, as Brox often did, sniffed for assent. What the mage's sense nearly overwhelmed him and confirmed his fear. Corielstrasz, smell the air. Tell me what you detect. The dragon immediately obeyed. What Krasis could see of his expression turned startled.
I sense our own kind. Only one. No, there are so many they overlap. What does it mean?
Malfurion asked Krasis. The dragon mage hissed. It means that the demons we fought have done us more harm than I could have imagined.
But we escaped virtually unscathed.
Krasis would have preferred a few new wounds to what they had instead suffered. Even the minutes used to fight their way free of the trap had been too much. The others would be far ahead by now. There was so much that he wanted to relay, but the spell cast on him prevented it. To Malfurion, Krasis could only utter one thing, but it was enough. The other dragons are ahead of us, Druid, and he, no doubt, is at the head of the flight. Krasis saw that Malfurion had grasped the essence of his words immediately. The dragons were heading for the battle, certain that they wielded a power sufficient to destroy the Burning Legion. They could not know that Neltharion, the one who led them to that battle, would there betray them. Miles ahead and swiftly approaching their destination, the dragons flew, ready for battle. Neltharion had led them along a route low to the ground, using the might of the dragon soul to eradicate the mist. That in itself had impressed the rest, including Alexstrasza and the other aspects. No one doubted the amazing properties of his creation. And as he soared toward his impending triumph, Neltharion's head filled with the whispered promises. Nearly there, they said. Soon, they promised. Soon all would bow before his glory and the world would be made right. What do you wish of us? Alexstrasza called to him. I wish you to bare your throat to me, the Earthwarder thought, but instead answered,
I have described the array. I need all sit in the sky, as I asked. The dragon soul will do the rest.
As simple as that. I want to make it easy for you to bow to me.
Yes, as simple as that.
She asked no more questions, for which Neltharion was grateful. His mind raged, and her nattering had nearly caused him to give himself away. The dragon soul, his dragon soul, continued to clear the way for their eyes. As Neltharion peered ahead, he caught a glimpse of movement on the ground, movement like thousands of ants. They had come upon the battle. He could scarcely contain his glee. Patience, murmured the voices. Patience. Yes, the black dragon could afford to be patient a little longer. He could be magnanimous. The prize was so great. A few more minutes would not matter, just a few more minutes. Brock saw them first. Wiping the sweat from his brow after having dispatched a fell beast, the orc happened to glance up and see the first of the Leviathans arrive over the battle scene. He gaped for a moment, almost losing his head to a fell guard for his stupidity. Brox traded blows with the demon, cut the creature into 3 pieces, and stepped back and looked around. Unfortunately, that one was not near. The orc snorted. Ronan might not know of the dragons yet, but surely it would not be long before everyone became aware of their presence. The struggle, Brox decided, had just grown a lot more interesting. Ronan had never reached Lord Ravencrest. The noble stood within sight of him, but the sudden shift in the fight had forced the wizard to concentrate instead on keeping the front line from collapsing before him. Several quick spells of short duration had helped stabilize it, but he could not save the situation all by himself. Unfortunately, the Moon Guard was already stretched thin in some places, and in others Illidan had them focusing on him so that he could cast his grand spells. Malfurion's brother had grown more and more reckless, and not simply because of the circumstances. He flung spells left and right as if they were pebbles, not caring that he came precariously close to hitting his own people. Another area threatened to buckle. Prodded on by the Doom Guard, 3 Infernals collided with the soldiers there, tossing them everywhere. Felgar poured through, chopping and thrusting at anything that still showed life. The red-haired wizard gestured, but just as he finished the last bit of his spell, an explosion rocked the region in question. The infernals shattered, and the monstrous warriors behind them fell, their armor and most of their flesh torn away. Had that been the only result, Ronan would have cheered. However, among the demon dead were many night elves who had suffered the same horrible fate. Survivors cried out for aid. Blood splattered everything. Ronan cursed, but not because the fault had been his. His spell remained uncast. His furious gaze fell upon Illidan. The sorcerer had finally done it. I'm looking to see. I'm just rereading it. Yeah, he had finally done it. He had killed his own. And the most horrific part was that he had either not noticed or not cared. The Burning Legion forgotten, Ronan began shoving his way toward Malfurion's twin. Illidan had to be taken into account. This could not happen again. The subject of his righteous ire turned and saw him approaching. Illidan gave him a smile of triumph, which did nothing to alleviate the wizard's anger. But then Illidan looked up past Ronan. Both his eyes and his smile widened as he pointed. Despite wanting nothing to distract him, Ronan had to look. Eyes too widened, and a curse escaped his lips. There were dragons in a suddenly clearing sky. Hundreds of dragons. "No!" Ronan growled at the high-flying creatures. He made out one at the forefront, a black so large that he could be only one dragon. That in turn meant that this could be only one particular event in history. The very worst of events as far as the defenders could be concerned. No, not now. Not now. Bum, bum, bum. Yeah, so I agree with Brock. This is about to get a lot more interesting because how does this play out? Now we know this is called the Demon Soul. So at some point, very soon here, because we've only got 5 chapters in this book left, this Dragon Soul has to be fully corrupted and revealed to actually be the Demon Soul. Yes, that's going to be bad. But do all of the flights immediately turn? We know the black flight's already evil. And we know some things happen. Like the blue flight goes insane. The green flight, I don't think anything bad ever really happens to him. I think they just get confined to the Emerald Dream. And the red flight become enslaved eventually. But what happens now? Like, do most of them die? Or, so I am interested in seeing how this kind of really shakes out. In the meantime, you would think it'd be very hard to trick them all immediately without helping. But you could hypothetically use the Dragon Soul to just wipe everybody out, or like good and bad, or just good, or whatever. I don't know that Meltharion is actively working against or with excuse me, the Burning Legion yet. We'll see. Okay, guys. Another episode in the pipes, 5x5. Looking forward to the next one. I think things are going to be neat. Thanks for listening, as always. I'll see you in the next episode of Lore of Warcraft.